Alrighty, we'll get started in just a second, everybody. I hope you guys are enjoying your Monday. Like I said in the post, we're going to talk a lot about different things here on the channel, especially talking about the Team USA, what we think about the whole roster. Do we think it's enough to win the gold? We'll talk about that and so much more, especially winning the World Cup for basketball, which we've done numerous times. And then we're also really going to talk about players and where they are ranked right now and where we think they'll be ranked in the future. So we're just gonna wait for Pete. Pete's gonna hop on in just a second. He's just setting up a couple new things on his end, and then he'll be on to talk about all this stuff and so much more. So be prepared for another great episode of The Charge, and we'll get with you guys in about a couple minutes. I'll show myself in a little bit. Give me about 2 or 3 minutes and I'll be there. Alrighty, how is everyone doing? This is, of course, your boy Bernie here on The Charge, the latest NBA news and rumors, and of course, basketball opinions. Like I said, we're just going to wait for Pete. He's setting up a couple things on his end, like I told you guys, and then we will be set to go again to talk about so much more on this channel. Like I said, we're going to talk about this Team USA roster that's right behind me. We're going to talk about what we think about the roster. Is it strong enough to win the whole thing? And we're going to do so much more today as well. Like I said, we're going to talk about the top 15 players, I believe, and what players could potentially make the jump into that top 15. There's a lot of fringe guys on the outside that could potentially be looking at to take some spots. One spot in particular I can really think about, as you guys probably could think about yourselves as well. There's going to be one player that might get replaced in that sense, but like I said, we're going to wait for Pete to get on. So let's see here. Let's see if there's any kind of latest news and rumors on the Real GM or just kind of in the news outlets today. We'll go with, let's see here. Let's see if they have see if I can go to the Athletic, or actually, you know what? Let's just kind of look at some news here. Jabari Parker signing with Barcelona. I think that is not the biggest news in the world. I know that's not going to get people out of their seats to tune in today. But, shout out to Jabari Parker, a guy that really, I think, in my opinion, should have gotten another opportunity in the league. I know that during his rookie year, he was absolutely tearing it up and was doing so many great things until he tore his ACL and really hasn't recovered since that ACL injury. And it continues to be the injuries that happened to Jabari Parker. So many best wishes to him as he heads up to Barcelona, and hopefully he can have a good career there and hopefully dominate. Like I said, that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing, and hopefully he can find a way to get himself back into the NBA at some point. He's still only like 27, 28, so I'm hoping that he gets at least one more shot before he decides to pack it all in and retire in that sense. Let's see here. Do we have Pete? Is Pete in the building?
You hear me?
We can hear you loud
Hello?
and clear. Let me just make sure they can hear you on our end or
Okay.
on the channel. Talk again, Pete.
Hello, hello. What's up, everybody? How you doing today?
Yep, you are live.
Get it.
All right. So, like I told everybody today, we are going to be talking, like I said, about the Team USA roster. I'm going to unveil it in a second as soon as I move on to the next transition. We're going to look at that roster. Is it strong enough to win the to win the whole thing for the World Cup, or is the U.S. finally going to meet its match? And then we're also going to talk about the incident that happened over the weekend where the select team actually kicked Team USA's butt, but then obviously they played another game and Team USA won that game. With a surprise change in the roster, we'll talk about that player as well. And kind of a topic that Pete brought up, and like I said, and I keep repeating it for you guys, we're gonna talk about the top 15, top 10 players. And really, this was inspired by Pete. Who is going to be entering in that top 10 to top 15 players coming into next year? Because you actually brought up an interesting point, Pete. It's going to be a bit of a doozy to kind of go through that list because there's a lot of great players still on there, but there's probably going to be some players that kicked out because either they're getting older or you're getting these young players that are going to take the next jump into their career. So that'll be a
Sure.
fun one to talk about.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Uh, let's see here.
I also have one more thing for you, Bernie. I don't know when we want to do this. We could do this at the end. I actually want to introduce one more new segment. I think a regular occurring segment, but we can do that whenever you're ready.
All right. We'll get that at the end of this whole situation. I'll let you introduce that at the end. So really quick, I'm gonna head over to the live scene and let's get started with the first story. And today, guys, like I said, we're going to talk about the Team USA. We know that these rosters have been made up long time ago. We're finally getting into the swing of things for the Team USA FIBA Basketball World Cup. The Women's World Cup is just ending, but the boys or men's basketball is just beginning. So the roster goes as follows: we got Paolo Banchero, who originally was going to play for Italy, but ended up switching to USA. You got Mikal Bridges, you got Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, Jaren Jackson Jr., Cam Johnson, Walker Kessler, Bobby Portis, and Austin Reeves. And that is when it's going to start. It's going to start August 25th through September 10th. And they are going to be in the locations of Indonesia, Japan, and the Philippines for this World Cup of Basketball. All right, Pete. Let's start off with the first question before we get into really talking about probably the juicier story that people are probably going to be in here for, which is of course that Cade Cunningham absolutely destroyed this team when they played against each other. And we'll talk about obviously the starting five that they had. But what is your opinion on this roster? Do you think it's strong enough? Are we getting to a point now where the older players are starting to kind of exit out, and now you have these other, I would even say younger than the players that were there before. Guys like Zach LaVine, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, like those guys were the ones that, they brought home the gold. But they've kind of, I would say, taken a step back and let these even younger guys with some veterans here and there join this team. So, what's your opinion on this roster?
I think I like it more than most people do. I've seen a lot of people saying this is like the B teams, a lot of scrub like guys relative to what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what international basketball has become for the United States. It's kind of a one and done type situation,
Right.
like in terms of the quality of player that actually wants to go, right? I think it's like a different proposition nowadays than it used to be. It used to be more a matter of like this is your obligation as a member of the United States population and just like an elite basketball player. That's clearly not the case. I mean, we would have seen people like Kevin Durant would have continued, for a long time playing on the United States team, obviously, amongst other people, LeBron, all these guys.
Right.
Um, but I also think one thing that's important to note about
Oh, Pete, you still there? Then we lost him for a second. Um, I guess I can go while Pete's still connecting. I don't know if it's my side or his side. Let me just make sure it's not my side, and you guys can still watch the stream. I don't want to interrupt
that.
any flow. Oh, I think you're back now.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. It said Discord had some crazy RTC disconnection error. All
Mm-hmm.
right, regardless, what I was saying is just like it seems like a cultural shift in what the NBA is actually, or what the United States basketball team is looking for, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't want to step on my segment later, so I won't lead
The
into it
prelude,
too
the
much.
prelude.
But I will talk about a guy that I think is interesting in the case that he's not there, and that's Trey Young, right? Like there's reports out there that he wanted to be on this Team USA team, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
not there. There are a lot of people that would argue just on its face that he would be the best player on the team. He would definitely be better than Jalen Brunson, a proven guy, right? But I think that this is what this team is not looking for that, right? Like they're looking for
Mm-hmm.
chemistry. They're
Mm-hmm.
looking for a team of guys who obviously pass the ball and are not looking to play isolation basketball. And I think the fact that the guys that are out there are there, like it really Steve Kerr is looking to build a functional basketball team. He is
Mm-hmm.
not trying to put a bunch of guys like your turn, my turn,
Yeah.
because that's not going to work in international basketball the way that these other nations are organized. Like
No.
we've seen that. And I think that that's something that gets super underrated. We send these guys to go play international basketball. We look back at like the Redeem team, right? They needed to redeem themselves because they did poorly the first time around, but it
Right.
was because it was all your turn, my turn. There was no leadership, there was no organizational structure. They weren't running sets, they weren't doing anything. They just thought, we're American, we are the best, we're coming from the best
Mm-hmm.
league in the world. We deserve to win. Like
Right.
that's it's as simple as that. But that's just not the case. And I,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Bernie. I really like it. I like all the bench guys. I like just the versatility of the team in general. There's a ton of guys who obviously are good locker room dudes, but
Yeah.
also they're just functional players in multiple ways on the court. And I think that that is very interesting for the United States to be looking like that's clearly they're taking that path. It's not even an underlying like I don't think I'm reading into anything. They
Yeah.
clearly chose to do something that way. So what do you think, Bernie?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think in the perspective of again, we saw how the team did in the Olympics the past year with that Jason Tatum, Zach Levine team, and they struggled, uh, in a sense where it looked a little concerning that they were not going to win the gold medal. Which, anything that you know about U.S. sports, especially when it comes to the Olympics, um, we love our gold medals. Like we want everything. We want to go for the best, be the best. Everything has to be gold, especially in the sports that we dominate in, right? So, some
Mhm.
of the track and field stuff, not as much anymore, but you know what I mean? Like we want to win those events where we basically invented the sport, right? With basketball. But like you said, like the world is getting so much better, and we talked about this, and I've talked about this at nauseum with my friends. They get annoyed every time I talk about it. Basketball is going to become the new game of soccer, like in terms of everybody is going to have access to a hoop. Everyone's going to have access to a court, and that means that there's going to be a lot better players coming from international along with the states. And when that happens, you can't just do like you said, my turn, your turn basketball. And Steve Kerr, and you know him from coaching the San Antonio Spurs and coaching the Golden State Warriors. His basketball style of coaching isn't anything remotely close to your turn, my turn basketball. Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, your turn, my turn basketball, like if you have the dominant players, then yeah, for sure you're gonna win those games. But when you don't have the dominant players, and really what will destroy anybody having the best player in the world, and teams that have played against LeBron James will talk about it, and the San Antonio Spurs are the prime example of it, and even the Golden State Warriors to some extent. You have to play team basketball. Everything has to move. Things have to keep going. You can't just hold on to the ball, and that is kind of what's been the equalizer, I would say, for all these countries around the world playing against the US, especially in this last Olympics and now going into this World Cup. Now more teams are going to be playing more together basketball, more cohesion. Finding the open shot, skipping a good shot for a great shot, right? Thinking about that extra pass like the San Antonio Spurs did in the 2007 NBA Finals against a young LeBron James. Like that to me, um, is what Steve Kerr wants to bring back along with the U.S. because the U.S. can't just win on talent alone anymore because teams are so much better. Like, yes, they're not as athletic as these guys are, but if they are more together, if they know each other's tendencies, if they know, okay, we're going to run this set play, we're making sure that the hammer screen gets set to the corner so that way the corner is wide open for a guy to shoot. There's a lot of good stuff in there that that these young players need to understand. As we talk about AAU stuff, and that's another topic for another day that I can get annoyed with. But yeah, I'm just excited to see what this roster can do. I think it's a team, like you said, of young guys who are hungry, who want to prove themselves, and I'm excited to see how this team performs in the World Cup.
Well, and before we get too far off of this, Bernie, like I think something that's really fascinating about this, even beyond just like whatever your personal opinion of this team is, right? I think if you look at the coaching staff that's in place for this team, Steve Kerr, it's Eric Spoelstra, it's Ty Lue, it's Mark Few. Okay. Say what you will about Mark Few. He's unproven on the professional level. Okay. And his team never gets it done in March Madness. Beyond the point. Other three guys are three of the top 5 coaches in the NBA. Okay. Without a doubt. And I would argue you have easily the number 1 coach in Spoelstra. And I would say, if not the number 2, you have, the third guy, which is Steve Kerr. And then Ty Lue is right there too. Right. These guys assembled this roster, right?
Yeah.
I find it very humorous that on one front we can, we have as a public, the media and casual fan can watch the NBA finals and shout until they're blue in the face about how unbelievably underappreciated Eric Spoelstra is as a coach. Look at what he's done with this Miami Heat team. These guys that we doubted all the way from the beginning of the season until game 6 of the NBA finals, right? Whatever it was. People criticizing this team are people like Gilbert Arenas, right? This is his quote from today that came out. You see that list they got? Sorry ass group, Arenas said. I'm sorry. I'm happy for the people who make it. It's cool for some of the guys who got there. Some of them probably don't even start on their teams. I don't know. Like, this is clearly somebody who not only is he's attracted to the numbers. He's attracted to the stardom, the names, right? But there's a reason that Gilbert Arenas isn't coaching the Miami Heat. There's a reason that players like this don't necessarily end up becoming the greatest coaches of all time. Is because it's not as simple as just looking at the surface level and saying, we saw Trae Young in the Eastern Conference Finals. He took the Atlanta Hawks team and beat the Philadelphia 76ers to get there. Okay, that's well and dandy. Has he done it since? Does that change the fact that he has a lot of questions as far as in the locker room, how people respond to him in terms of all these different things, right? It's just really, I just find it very ironic, how these guys can move the needle or move the goalpost in terms of what they think is like worth celebrating, right? Like, this roster, there's literally no roster in the world that's going to be better than this FIBA team they have put together already. Is it as good as it would have been with, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Devin Booker, all these guys? No, it's not. But that doesn't change the fact that those types of teams don't always win either. It's just not that simple. There has to be methodology behind the collection of players. And I think that that's something that the layman looking at these teams, or looking at this team, I should say, is just, it's going to go over their head. A lot of these guys on this team do different things. And that is what's truly important in the NBA is versatility. Look at the Denver Nuggets, the team that just won the championship. They had a player who could do any single thing. Like, you needed this response right here. Okay, Christian Brown, get out on the court. Christian Brown, excuse me. Okay, we need a bigger point guard that's going to, get Gabe Vincent off the court. Hey, Bruce Brown, go handle the ball for a couple quarters, right? It's just not that simple, man. And I'm very excited to see this team because I actually think they're going to prove a lot of people wrong in the sense that the chemistry is going to be great. It already seems to be from what we've heard and seen. Now, honestly, imagine a team, Bernie, with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Trae Young, Steph Curry. Imagine they get dog walked by the select team that came in, right?
Mhm.
What's the response then? Response is at that point, well, this is the best we've got. What are we going to do now? And are they going to have the collective, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? The mentality to check themselves and say, you know what? I'm not doing what I need to do for this team to win. I might be Devin Booker, I might be Trae Young, but do I have the ability to step back and look at this from, the top-down view of what Coach Kerr wants for me? And I'm not so sure, because once you get to the level that those guys are at, nobody tells you that type of stuff.
Mhm.
So maybe we're seeing just like the modern response to how inflated the top level players' egos are, right?
Mhm.
Like the ability to actually have guys that are not at the pinnacle of success, like you can still check these guys. You can still bench these guys in favor of a younger guy.
Mhm.
You can't do that when you have the tippity top of the league. And I think that matters, man. It just really does. And
Yeah.
I just hate when you have guys like Gilbert Arenas out there talking all sorts of craziness. Like these dudes stepped up to want to play for Team USA. You know? You could say it all day. Why don't we have Kevin Durant or these guys? They have to want to play too.
Yeah.
They have to want it. I don't know. I don't want to get too far, but
Mhm.
I really like this team a lot, and I feel bad for the response because it's really unfair to a lot of these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like you said, I think that this team will be good enough. I don't. I'm. The one concern I will say to me, um, will probably be rim protection. Um, Jaren Jackson Jr. is great, but if he's in foul trouble, I know Walker Kessler's good. But that would be my only concern for this team, really. It's just if Triple J gets into a foul situation, who's going to come in and help out in that sense. But like you said, I think this team is good enough. I think this team has a lot of young players that seem hungry, that seem to want to better themselves in the World Cup, especially in a different stage. I think a lot of these guys have been a part of. I know some of these guys may have been part of like a World Cup team, um, where it's like the U19s or the U16s.
Mhm.
But it'll be fun to see these guys in like an actual official 2023 FIBA World Cup, where they're playing against from all the best teams, right? Luka Doncic is going to be in there. I think Jamal Murray is going to be there. I'm not sure about Jokic. I don't think Jokic will be there, but
I think he's like the only really big one that's not playing.
exactly. And so to me, like I just want to make sure that these guys are getting the best experience too, because you're going to be going against some of the superstars out there as well who aren't American and who are going to probably play with their team and love playing with their team so much. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited for it. We'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. They don't play until the 26th, I believe. I think their schedule goes as follows for the group stages. They're going to play New Zealand first, then they're going to play Greece, and then they're going to play Jordan. Kind of a light group
Yeah.
to start off, so that's not bad. Greece might be a little tough with I think Giannis is playing on this team.
I believe so.
I'd have to double check, but obviously it's probably going to
So
be Greece and
the biggest one is Canada. I mean, that's the
yeah.
biggest threat for the US for sure. That team is actually stacked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even then, I mean, like I find it humorous that they would pretend like there's scrubs on this Team USA team. Like the only guy I would even remotely be like, okay, we couldn't have done better than Bobby Portis, right? Like that's literally the only guy on the team. It's
Yeah.
the only one I would say like there's not a power forward in the league that you would say let's give this guy a bench role. But I think it's like incredibly disrespectful to guys like Reeves, right? Like Reeves was like third best player like in the Western Conference Finals in a couple games,
Yeah.
That's insanity to pretend like this dude's a scrub. Jalen Brunson, I mean, he was given the Heat work on his own for a few games, and they went to the finals. So, yeah, man, I'm very interested to see. But let's talk about the change that the Team USA made. I think we got to get into a
Yeah.
little bit of the nitty gritty, right?
Yeah. I love that transition. You
Um,
lead it. You lead that transition. It's all you, my
do you,
guy.
You mentioned it. You mentioned it right in the beginning. The first couple set of scrimmage games Cade Cunningham came in and absolutely just bully balled the Team United States, the actual FIBA team that was there. Which, a little side note, I'll say, I think that's just more a reminder of how talented Cade Cunningham is. I think he's everything people wanted Ben Simmons to be and more. And I think as the years go on, we're going to see it. He's huge. He can play anywhere on the court. And realistically, like what he did against the Team USA team is what he's going to be able to do for a long time.
Yeah.
He's a mismatch for everybody on the court. That being said, they go into the next day. Looks awful. They have not beaten this team of guys, none of which are actually on the team. And what do? They say, let's get some young, fresh blood in here, and let's get the actual alpha male of this team in the starting lineup, and it's Anthony Edwards. And then what did they do? They won every single game they played in those scrimmages the next day. I think it's really interesting that, and who did he take the spot from, Bernie? Do you know off the top of your head? I'm pretty sure.
Cam Johnson.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Cam Johnson, which to me I find very interesting that he wasn't already starting in that spot. I think that might be more of a question about his age.
Yeah.
Even then, man, that guy is one of the very few young United States talents, Bernie, that I would say is in like the direct lineage of like kind of the Kobe mentality, right? Where it really seems when I watch Anthony Edwards play, he really wants to dominate dudes. Like he is not out there to just make a paycheck and get to the next game. He is really trying to assert himself on every single possession, and that's what this team needs. Like that's not necessarily Jalen Brunson's strong suit, who's gotten a ton of, praise from these coaches. He needs guys around him who physically can do that. That's not his strong suit. This is why I like the construction, combining what we were just talking about with this, this change that Steve Kerr and this coaching staff made. This is why this team is pretty well constructed. They have guys who are going to be able to come off the bench and say, you know what? I might not be starting, but I am actually the best player on this team.
Yeah.
And realistically, there are not many nations, period, that have guys that can do anything remotely like that. There might only be one or two, Canada and maybe like Spain or somewhere like that. So I don't know, man. I'm interested. What do you think about Anthony Edwards? I think we're going to end up talking about him again later in this stream. No spoilers. You might be able to get some ideas based on our preview earlier in the stream. But what do you think about that change? Why do you think he wasn't starting in the first place, Bernie?
I just think it's kind of like you said, it's a rite of passage in terms of having the older guys start, seeing what they can do. And then, eventually it's kind of the same process that you do with any varsity player. You bring the freshmen up to the varsity team, and, you don't want to force them to go play right away, but you let them kind of mature, let them nurture. And then eventually, as soon as you see an opportunity where, guys aren't performing as they need to, you put that freshman in, or you put that player that's going to dominate in. And I just think that that's kind of what they were doing with Anthony Edwards. But, you could see it from a mile away that Anthony Edwards was going to be a star of the show. We talked about him last year and, the injury, especially in that playoff series against the Lakers. Like, if he didn't have that hurt shoulder, I think that they would have probably won that game against the Lakers, because it was a tight game. And every time Anthony Edwards had the ball, he was in great position. It's just he was hurt and he had to chuck up a really bad shot. And, his jump shot's not there yet, but it's getting closer to where it needs to be. And, watching the scrimmages, I believe they're going to actually play tonight against Puerto Rico in a warm-up friendly. So I'll probably be tuning into that as a basketball nerd myself. But, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch him play, because to be honest, Pete, he kind of reminds me, and I probably am stealing this from some website or something like that, but he kind of does remind me of like a young Dwayne Wade. Very athletic, can score at the rim. Like, that's where he was effective. Kind of a quiet assassin in a sense where you don't really hear much about him. And he doesn't really show emotion in the sense that he's never too negative, but he's also never too positive. And that's kind of what reminds me. That's kind of one of the reasons why he reminds me of Dwayne Wade in a sense.
Yeah, I could see that. You know who else he reminds me of? This is like mentality. I get like young Jimmy Butler vibes. Like it just like seems like he has this level of just competitive like monster buried under the surface
Yeah.
where like if the challenge arises, and that's why that Lakers game you brought up was so painful. Like they were so close. They could have really won that game.
Mm-hmm.
He so clearly just couldn't get himself to the point where he knew that he was hurting his team. Which is, I mean, that's a sign. We've seen tons of great players find themselves in that same exact position. So I also think one thing too, that he's 22. He was the youngest player, I'm pretty sure, in his draft class coming out of
Yeah.
Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still, I mean, he's younger than almost anybody on this team. He might actually be the youngest player on this team, even counting Walker Kessler, who's only 1 year removed from his rookie season. He's younger than Walker Kessler.
Dang. That's actually crazy
Yeah,
how young he is.
it's pretty nuts.
But yeah, I think Cade, well, obviously do want to talk about Cade as well, but just let me finish up a point about Anthony
Yeah.
Edwards. Like I said, I think he's gonna be the star of the show this year. We'll obviously spoiler alert for the next segment that's coming up. He's gonna be up there on that list if he can continue the
Yeah.
trajectory, because I think it is make it or break it season for that squad he's on in Minnesota. So it'll be fun to watch him play. I'm excited to see him play tonight. I know, like I said, they have a warm up friendly against Puerto Rico. Should be fun to watch if you guys aren't doing anything. If there's no sports, which I don't think there is any, maybe baseball, maybe a league cup for soccer. But it'll be fun to watch that team play and really see all those guys play. Like I said. But I'll move on to kind of the main star of the show. Like you said, you kind of talked about it. Cade Cunningham. I just want to show a little bit of this film really quick. Dominating with his passes. I know this is a little dark, but from Team USA basketball, they're kind of showing you Cade in the scrimmage right now, dominating tremendously again, finding open guys, hitting guys on alley-oops with Jalen Duren, Jalen Williams, or sorry, Jalen Green, excuse me. There's another player that was on this team as well. Again, as you can kind of see here, like, I'm excited for Jalen Duren and his up and coming next season. And Peyton Pritchard as well on the select team. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch these guys play. I'm excited for it. When they get their opportunity to play for Team USA. But even just coming into next season, I think Cade will be one of those players that will definitely shock a lot of people, because obviously I was so hyped on the Pistons last season, but unfortunately due to that Cade Cunningham injury, it just it all petered off and did not go to plan. But I am excited to see where this all ends up going for Cade, and kind of the confidence booster he needs going into his next season, especially coming off an injury. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be exciting. And like you said, Pete, like he has a chance to be up there on a top list of top 15, top 20 players if he continues his trajectory. But he's going to have to need some wins for that squad in Detroit, which I'm hoping that he can get with the revived squad.
Going off that, like, there's something that really cracks me up, Bernie, as like a fan of like the history of basketball, like an avid, like, I love basketball. I look at stuff that happened before I was born almost every day, just out of pure, like, I want to see more of the sport, because that's just what I do to entertain myself, right? I just find it so funny, the short-term memory of people, Like, people act like this team losing to the select team is like this atrocity. Like, how could you, this is the team representing our country, and they just lost all these games to the select team. They're acting like these aren't professional basketball players that they're playing against. They're playing against Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jalen Williams. They're playing against this crop of young talent who has absolutely nothing to lose in this game. They're going in with all the expectations that they're going to get absolutely trampled by this team of veterans. But when they go in, they're all playing free. They're not playing with any expectations on their shoulders other than let's just play our best and win, right? Dream Team in 1992 lost to a select team, okay? That is a team that had Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, David Robinson, Karl Malone, Scottie Pippen, John Stockton, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. Literally 10 of the greatest players of all time, and they lost to a select team that had these names on it: Chris Webber, Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley, Anthony Hardaway, Allen Houston, Jamal Mashburn, Eric Montross, Rodney Rogers. We like come off it, acting like losing to Cade Cunningham and these guys is that crazy. Michael Jordan and all those guys lost to Jamal Mashburn and these other dudes. That's crazy to just assume that, it's over for these guys. Look at these scrubs. Like, there's just no effort to look at the history of basketball and understand, like, this is a game where the best team does not always win.
Yeah.
Honestly, winning is not always necessarily the point. You as a coach, Bernie, you know this. These are scrimmages. You're not playing to win a scrimmage. You're playing to figure out what you can fix going into actual games that matter. And what happened in the scrimmage? They made an adjustment, and then they came out and won the games with Anthony Edwards. So I just think people need to take a step back and stop thinking just because one game happens and something embarrassing happens, it's the end of the world, man. Because really, look at how the guys on the team responded. They all kind of chuckled and like, we'll get them tomorrow, and they did. So I don't know, man. Go watch the Redeem Team documentary and see how it went for LeBron and Carmelo and Dwayne Wade. And that team was terrible by the standard that they had. And they had every big name they could have had, and it still didn't go well.
Yeah.
Just doesn't matter. That's what the league is now, man. It is a clout. How much does your name open doors? How much do you have name brand recognition in terms of marketability? People think that's what makes good basketball players, but it just truly isn't the sport, man. It's just not. It's not how it works.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's gonna be a fun and interesting World Cup games all the way till September 10th. Gonna be a lot of fun to see which guys step up and which guys can do their thing. But let us know in the comment section down below, who do you guys think will win the World Cup? Do you guys think the Team USA still gets the gold, still wins the whole thing, or do you think that there's another team out there like a Greece that could potentially win the whole World Cup? I'd love to know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and who you guys think could win against in the World Cup. Is it going to be Team USA or will it be another team? Let us know in the comment section down below. All right. Let's move on to the next segment, Pete, and we're going to kind of transition to talking about these young guys that we continue to talk about in the select scrimmage, moving it over to what we think could be the top 10 to 15 NBA players in the league currently. Last year, according to CBS Sports, they have Jokic at 1, Giannis at 2, Doncic at 3, Tatum at 4, Embiid at 5, Durant at 6, Curry at 7, Shai Gilgeous at 8, Dame at 9, Ja Morant at 10. And just to kind of round out the 15, you have LeBron James and Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, Sabonis, and Kawhi Leonard, with Halliburton, Anthony Davis, Pascal Siakam, Jimmy Butler, and James Harden rounding out the top 20. All right, Pete. I said a mouthful there. There's 20 players there. You'll disagree with probably a bunch of them. I can already hear it in the voice. But in your opinion, which young
You might send me that list. Sorry, before you finish, you might send me that. Thank you.
Yeah, but really, I kind of want to get your opinion of, like, maybe not necessarily, and I'll send in the Discord for you.
Perfect.
Who do you think? See if I said, there you go. Just saying the list.
There it is.
In your opinion, what young player could potentially enter in this conversation before we talk about replacing a player or anything like that? And let me read this comment really quick before you give your answer. Kubi23 said they should have gotten Wendell Carter Jr. on that team. Nah,
it wouldn't have been bad in terms of versatility. I'd probably rather have him than Bobby Portis. That's for sure.
Bobby Portis, ultimate glue guy, though. Can't hate on the glue.
That's literally, I think, the reason he's there. I mean, it's glue guys. That's what they're looking for.
But which young player, Pete? What young player could potentially be added to this top 10 to 15, in your opinion? Who's going to take that next step?
I think there's a couple obvious people we already talked about. So I will just get them off the table as far as, like, obvious ones as far as, people we've already discussed. I think Anthony Edwards is the number one, as far as I'm concerned. He's the best player on a team that's actually talented enough to possibly contend. I mean, that would be a big point of discussion, debate for a lot of people, that Timberwolves team, but they
Hmm.
have the talent. Whether or not you think Rudy Gobert should be Defensive Player of the Year doesn't really matter. They have enough guys, enough versatility to be a talented team in the playoffs. I do think Anthony Edwards is like clearly the next one up, just in terms of he has the whole package. He's got the mentality. He's going to have huge, highlight plays that elevate him because that is part of the equation. What makes a superstar? It's not just the play, it's also the flashiness, how much people want to watch you play. So I would say he's clearly number one as far as the guys that could take a jump. But I would say Cade is right there too, Bernie. I think people really underestimate how bad his year one situation was in Detroit. There was nothing there. Had Dwayne Casey, who, I mean, he might as well have been a mummy coaching the team the last few years. Like, it would just, there's nothing in terms of any sort of game plan, game to game. He didn't have really anything around him that kind of played into his strong suits, really.
Hmm.
And then last year was just an albatross. It was a year that just didn't really matter. Once the shin got hurt enough where surgery could happen, he wanted to go for Wembanyama. So go take a year, get healthy, and come back next year. That is a dude that from the minute he comes back healthy is going to just wreck games all over the league against teams that people don't expect him to. And it's as simple as the fact that he's 6'8", he plays high level defense, and he can shoot. That's all you need in today's league to be a really high level player, and he's got it from day one. Is he like actually listed at 6'8", or is he a little shorter than that? Because I feel
Cade.
like I've seen that. Yeah,
I think he's like 6'6", 6'7". I think he's 6'6".
yeah. I think that might be like with shoes on. The number they
Hmm.
give is 6'8". I feel like I've seen that around, but those are the first two that come to mind. Do you have any other ones before we get into maybe some of the less obvious guys?
One player that I think could potentially enter in this conversation, and he's already there, basically, I think, is going to be Tyrese Halliburton. Um,
Yep.
a young player, only going to be, I think he's going to turn 23 this year. I mean, again, like when you think about young guys that are going to be entering in their prime, guys that are going to be dominating, like he just signed that contract extension. He's a guy that, again, a lot of people were questioning on the draft day, like, always got a funky shot. He kind of, his shot doesn't look, conventional, and people are going to question what he can do. But offensively, defensively, he's kind of shown you that he is an everyday player. He's a superstar in many
Mhm.
forms. And I'm excited to see him take that next step, especially when this Indiana Pacers team finally decides to step it up in the terms of, hey, we're finally going to look to get better. We're going to look to finally build around this guy in a way that we're going to get players that fit, like you talk about all the time, the timeline for him. And so I'm excited for when that happens. I think that he's going to be a guy that will be an All NBA second and first team in his near future. Like that's how good I think he's going to be. Again, I'm excited for what the Pacers will have in store for that guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think he might actually. I said Anthony Edwards might be the closest. It's probably Halliburton, just purely based on he's a little older. He's actually going to be 24 this year, still very young. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, man, he's an all around type of guy. He's the type of guy that elevates, like raises all ships, as they say. You know. Um, I just got to say my guy. Bernie, you're gonna laugh at this because I
RJ
say him all
Barrett.
the time. Oh, stop. Evan Mobley.
Yeah.
My guy Mobley, he's literally like one piece of his game away, and it's just a consistent shot. If he could, if he could just hit threes at like 35%, even like 34%, like the dude is really right there. Like he's already, in my opinion, top three defender in the league. He's going to be consistently for probably the next 10 years if he stays healthy. But he's also in one of the best situations, I would argue, of any of these guys. The team is truly built for lots of postseason experience. And I think one of the most underrated parts of that team, Bernie, is just like what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell, right? Like
Yeah.
that is a team that can't hedge every bet they have on Donovan Mitchell. So development of the guys they already have and have had still has to be like paramount to what they're going forward, thinking is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I'm very, very interested. Like Garland is another guy that we, obviously could talk about. He's right there. I just think Mobley is more, he's right there in terms of the whole package. Like I said it until I was blue in the face last season. I told you on the stream, everybody, the guy should have been defensive player of the year last year. If you look at his off-ball help defense, it was far and away the best in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the least to work with. He was playing essentially like a reverse point guard on defense. He was orchestrating everything on defense, his positioning and length. Literally everybody else on the team, their defensive rotations were based on what Mobley was doing. That is unbelievably high level for a 21-year-old to be that good on defense.
Yeah.
It's just gonna get better because the IQ is there and the size and athleticism it's off the charts. So yeah, Mobley is that guy. I'm telling you, if they run more pick and roll this year, he'll be up over 20 points per game and he'll be a borderline all-star. But I think with Mitchell there, the question is like, is there just not enough touches for him?
Yeah.
Depending on how that goes, there's still a lot of talk. Is Mitchell going to leave after next season or the season after? That
Mm-hmm.
might be the perfect runway to say, well, he already wants to leave. We have this kid who literally might be the next, top 15 guy. Let's just go that direction. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a hedge on circumstances changing, but I do think Mobley has all the talent to be a top 15 guy.
Yeah. Some kind of under the radar guys. And again, these might be guys that might need another year or two, maybe even a little bit more. That could be down the line. Someone that benefited tremendously from the Sacramento Kings run is a guy like Keegan Murray.
Yeah.
I think a guy that
It's a
shoots
deep cut, Bernie. I like it.
the guy that shoots the ball really well. Again, like when you saw him in the playoffs in that series against the Golden State Warriors, like yes, they lost, but when they finally decided to kind of turn it up a notch, or they needed that X factor to come in, he was one of those guys that you were like, okay, he's going to be a guy in the near future, just because of the fact that he can shoot the ball really well, can put the ball on the ground, and really, I think he's going to be a guy that just maybe won't ever be like, I would say, maybe in the top 10, but a guy that could definitely be in the top 20, top 15, if he plays his cards right, as a young guy that could definitely step up in that sense where, maybe he's the second or third guy on the team because they need a guy that could just shoot the rock. And when you shoot 42%, that is, that's going to get you a lot of places, and that's going to get you big contracts.
Sure.
So he's a guy I definitely have on my list as a guy that could definitely
One thing, I love Keegan Murray. Like he is, I like that pick a lot because I think he's probably pretty far off, but still, in terms of guys who are just not flashy, just do everything the right way, he's like a top candidate.
Mm-hmm.
The more I watch Keegan Murray play, the more I think, and this is hyperbolic in the sense that he's probably never going to be this guy. He does remind me in a weird way of Tim Duncan. Like it's just solid fundamental basketball, doing the little things that like just don't necessarily make him a exciting guy, but it's just winning basketball. I don't know. I really like that kind of stuff. He seems like he's gonna be somebody we talk about for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got two. I'm gonna go back to back two. One of them, actually, I think both of these are probably going to be debatable for a lot of people, but I think these are guys that potentially could be top 15, top 20 guys. Just the situation needs to be right for them. Okay, the first one, I do think the situation is here for this guy. Mikal Bridges, Bernie. I think he legit has top 15, 20 guy potential in him. And I think that hold people back from thinking super highly of him is just his age, right? He would not be the first late bloomer ever to be like in his, post 25 career in the NBA to then take the next step and become truly a guy in the league that you can build a team around. Like I think of guys like Steve Nash is the one that always comes to my head. Like didn't really go super great for him in Dallas. Gets shipped out. They choose Dirk. a couple of years in Phoenix, and then the dude all of a sudden, we get into that late 20s, 30 range, and he's one of the best players in the league. And it was purely circumstantial, but also he just kept getting better. Year after year, the work was being put in, and it wasn't, you know, athleticism dependent.
Mm-hmm.
It was nothing beyond just great. Kind of like what I was just saying with Keegan Murray, but obviously just from the guard perspective, that's Mikal Bridges as a three. I
Mm-hmm.
watch him. He's a guy that just is he is improving the small parts of his game that make the difference. And the opening he has now in Brooklyn and the apparent like trust and dedication that the Nets front office is putting into him, there is really a runway for this kid to be super special in this era of his career. Um, and we'll see what happens this year. If he averages as many points, just sheerly statistically, if he has the
Mm-hmm.
second half of what he did last season
Right.
all year upcoming,
Mm-hmm.
he'll be right there anyway. I just worry that like the damage is done in terms of like his mental image for people. People think of him as this role playing, just kind of, in the back wing of a team, like he's a great guy to have, but he's never going to be that great.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't get bad stats or good stats, bad team type of vibe from him. Even though that's what the Nets were last year, I think he's
Yeah.
better than that. My second one, Bernie, and I don't know, this might be the more controversial of the two. You tell me which one is more controversial of the two I'm giving you right now. I still think Desmond Bain is a guy that like might have like a really top of the NBA type level to him. And
Mm-hmm. Okay.
it's for a few reasons. One, his offensive game is just underrated. Like there's just no way, shape, form that you couldn't say it's underrated in the league right now. And part of the thing with him is he is the most offensively consistent player on his team, which will never be discussed on a team with John Morant with a flashier guy like that.
Yeah.
And then also they have the defensive consistency of Jaren Jackson Jr. that also overshadows Desmond Bain. The dude he's a cannon. He's like unlimited range. It's a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
shot. He's the type of guy that's going to age incredibly gracefully through the league. He also is a great defender too. Like he's an above average defender. And I think for all discussion about what Memphis does when John Morant is out and how much they perform just as well, people always make it a discussion about right? Is the team better without Ja, right? Or like this, what was it? They
Mm-hmm.
went like 20-4 a couple of years ago without him.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to see it this year too. What's gonna happen these first 25 games without him? I think what we're gonna see is very similar to 2 years ago. Desmond Bain is going to have the ball a lot more. He's going to shoot the ball a lot more, but also he's not going to just be like an ISO
Mm-hmm.
slasher who, dominates possessions like John Morant does.
Yeah.
So their offense is going to end up flowing very well through him, and his game is going to elevate because it's hidden under this superstar most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, he's still young too, man. He's only 23, I think. So yeah, man, I don't know, Bernie. Which one of those two guys do you think is more? I shouldn't say that. He's 25. I was 2 years off, so he's a couple years younger than Mikal Bridges. But I don't know, man. I see it still in him. What do you think?
I would say your Bane take is probably the more not outlandish is the right word, but I would say the more audacious pick, just because again,
Yeah.
a guy that I think we've seen when he's played with John Morant, without John Morant, like we've seen him in the playoffs too. Maybe he just needs a little more time and like to be that guy, and he was that guy for a second. In those playoff series, but the one thing I'm curious to see with Bane is, can he do it on a consistent night? Can he do it in the playoffs? And we've seen that hasn't been the case yet. And so I want to see him take that next step in the playoffs. Because again, I know what he does in the regular season. Someone who's drafted in fantasy basketball, played really well. Obviously, outperformed what a lot of
Mm.
people expected from him. But I kind of want to see a little bit more offensive consistency when the playoffs come. Because again, I think he's greater in the regular season. I just need to see it in the playoffs.
Well, let me give you two counterpoints. Just because Bane is my guy, I got to ride hard for this guy. All right. His regular season points per game is 21 and a half. Okay. Actually averages more points in the playoffs. He averages 23.5 in the playoffs. It's slightly less efficient. He's like 48% from the field in the regular season, which is incredible. Then he's about 43, 42% in the postseason. So it goes down, but he's taking more shots. He averages somewhere in like the 6 rebounds, 4 assists, kind of both postseason, regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my one thing for this guy, Bernie. All right. And there's a lot of people who are going to hear this and take it as a joke. Okay. I'm taking a slight at another player to make a joke about why Bane's going to be better. I'm not making a joke. I mean this very literally. He's going to be better sheerly from the fact that Dylan Brooks is not on this team. Like that type of guy was completely detrimental to a player like Desmond Bane. I would argue he had more impact on Desmond Bane's game than anybody else on the team, right? The rationale is Ja Morant is going to get his shots no matter what. He's the guy.
Mm-hmm.
You're not taking shots from him.
Yeah.
Aaron Jackson Jr. is the down low guy. He's a post player. You're not taking shots from him really either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the only people are these mid-level guys. The shooting guard, the small forward, and potentially whoever your 5 is if he's going to shoot. Luckily for them, it's Steven Adams, so it doesn't matter anyway. All these shots that Dylan Brooks are taking, which everybody and their mother agrees are terrible, ill-advised, just ball chucking shots. Those are coming directly out of Desmond Bane's pocket. Those are his shots. It's like you have, Draymond is the guy on the team taking shots from Clay with the Warriors. That didn't happen because everybody knew this guy's a way better shooter. Let's give him the shots. But Dylan Brooks is eating time, shots, and ball possession from better guys on his team, much more efficient guys. And I would argue, like I already said, there's nobody that suffered more than Desmond Bane in terms of his shots per game, just time with the ball in his hands because of Dylan Brooks than Desmond Bane. So I would argue the fact that Ja's gone for the first 25, absolutely no more Dylan Brooks. They made it very clear. And they even said the reason this guy's not on the team is his shot taking, his shot selection. Those shots are going to funnel directly to the next guy in line, and it's Desmond Bane. So I'm anticipating better shot selection from that team as a whole, which for a guy as efficient as Bane it's gonna come out in the statistics, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good shout. I think Mikal Bridges is going to take that next step for sure, especially with him just being the guy.
Just yeah,
Um,
too.
let's see here. I think I had a couple here. I think one of them, I think a guy that potentially could make a huge impact. Uh, a guy that I was kind of really high on. Um, one kind of deeper, I would say like Jalen Williams from OKC. I know he just signed that big
Sure.
contract.
Love them.
Again, a guy that is definitely going to be doing a lot of great things offensively for this Oklahoma City Thunder team. And the question now starts to become for the Thunder, and we've talked about it before. Like, what are they going to do because they have so many talented players? He is one of those talented players that emerged, right? A lot of people didn't really expect too much out of this guy from Santa Clara, but ended up balling out and is still balling out. Averaging 12, 4, 3 steals and 1 point, or sorry, three assists and about a steal a game. And I think he's just going to get better from here on out. He's looking to get a lot stronger and kind of build on his rookie campaign and see if he can't get a most improved or a 6-man off the bench type of role for this OKC team. I can see him doing that. I think that this team, the way it's constructed, Josh Giddey, another guy that I could potentially add to this list of guys that could take that next step. A guy that really, to me, is what I thought Lonzo was going to be, the Jason Kidd-esque type of player. Never going to average a lot of stats, not going to be flashy or anything like that, but is going to be solid and efficient. A triple-double always waiting to happen with Josh Giddey. And those are probably the two guys I would say for me that could potentially be on this at least top 15. I think Giddey might get ousted just because he doesn't score, doesn't have the flashiness that even a guy like Jalen Williams or any of the other guys that we talked about here are going to have those opportunities to. But if you want a point guard that's kind of the solidifier, the glue guy, long, athletic, I think Giddey's your guy. And then I think for Jalen Williams, going to be a guy that comes off the bench or starts on the team and just absolutely dominates the scoring and attacking hit downhill and I think I'm excited to see again with this Thunder team like how they are able to contractually keep all these guys because it's going to be a lot of money they're going to have to spend.
I mean, it's going to be impossible, really, when it comes down to it. Like you have to. The only way it's possible is if these guys don't end up being as good as we think they are, right?
Yeah.
That's really it comes down to that. I would argue that they're in a tough spot just because they have so many high end guys.
Yeah.
That it might be tough for like as much as I love Jalen Williams, I would honestly, if you're redrafting like a just young dudes under 22 right now that you would want going forward, he'd be really close to the top for me. Like he'd be
Mm-hmm.
right there. Same with Giddy. And I actually that's why I would say of the two you said, both of them being the OKC guys, I think Giddy has the higher chance sheerly based on like how much he's going to have the ball. He's going to
Yeah.
have the ball all the time
Mm-hmm.
with them and he's going to just put up like you said monster stats on a night in night out basis and that is a guy that has taken huge leaps every summer as far as I've watched him like for the last few years too. So great shouts on both of them. Can't disagree at all. I'm huge high on both of them. Here's my last two, Bernie. I'm gonna save I think my sleeper lock, even though he's not really a sleeper, like people know who this is, the guy I'm gonna say. But the next one I'll say, dude, Franz Wagner he
Yep.
stays underrated.
That was actually going to be my next one.
He stays underrated and underdiscussed on just such a crazy level. It really blows my mind. Like he is one of the very few guys that really can do it all at his size. And not only can he does. He is asked on a nightly basis to do everything for the team. He
Mm-hmm.
plays point guard for them a lot, plays pretty good defense. He also is, a very consistent shooting, just scoring threat at his size
Yeah.
too. I think for him, the biggest thing, and this is slightly kind of opposite to what I just said with OKC, but it's talent around him is finally starting to like line up with where he's at. And,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the timeline that we're talking about, the idea of Franz Wagner next to Paolo for the next 10 years,
Yeah.
it like if I almost makes me envious of Magic fans because those two guys, their skill sets play off each other incredibly well. If they develop their game around each other like they probably should be, and I hope they are doing, they're going to be so hard to play against because they're huge. They're constantly moving without the ball. Both of them are. I'm really high on Franz Wagner. I genuinely, he's one of the few guys. I have very little explanation as to why he's so underappreciated by people in the league. Like he is never in the discussion of these young guys who could be like potential superstars going forward. And the funny part, Bernie, is he almost kind of reminds me of like this is again a hyperbole, but it's like in the same sense of maybe it's just because of the way he looks. Like he's not necessarily the most athletic looking guy, and he's a big white dude. It's kind of Jokic-y, right? Like he doesn't really play conventional basketball, but when he's allowed to do the things that he excels at, it really truly makes everybody around him better. And those are the types of things that make you like a consistent guy in the league for a long time. If you elevate people, you're going to have a place on most teams. So, yeah, he's right there for me. I mean, a lot of his destiny, maybe it is tied to Paolo, but we both feel super strongly about him too. He's an obvious person we don't even have to talk about in this segment, right?
Yeah.
I think we're both in silent agreement. Like Paolo is a guy that, and we said this going into the draft last year, physically, just from day one, he was going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
But let me go to my last guy, and this is actually my last guy. Situation based, people who are not necessarily even top 35 guys, there is nobody that has the runway to be special and be like a top 20 guy sooner than Tyrese Maxey. He is the number one potential guy as far as he's never thought about like an Anthony Edwards, like a LaMelo Ball, but he truly might be in the best situation of all of those guys. Um, 'Cause a lot of people probably would roll their eyes as much as we've talked about how the
Hmm.
76ers have not necessarily done a great job
Yeah.
this offseason. The funny part is he's gonna be the one that benefits the most from how poorly this offseason has gone for them. Like, anything that happens with James Harden negative benefits Tyrese Maxey.
Hmm.
The funniest part about all of it, Bernie, and I don't know if you are gonna think I'm an insane person for saying this.
We'll see. We'll see.
In a lot of ways, like, he the offense last year at certain points, he should have been the second guy behind Embiid, purely based on the energy and the fact that you have, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bernie, you're the basketball coach, all right? One of the ways I think that, like, really high level basketball teams function at the highest level is by changing pace, like not necessarily getting into a stagnant rhythm of this is
Hmm.
how we play. We play at this pace, right?
Yeah.
They have the best potential 1-2 pace change switch up of any team in the league as far as they have the MVP who is this trotting, slow, roll around on the floor, whine to his everybody.
Hmm.
Guys, sorry, Embiid, I'm just kidding. But really, he's one of the slowest players in the league, right?
Right.
Still a freak athletically. Then you have this guy who's literally a lightning bolt. He's a bullet racing down the court. He's so fast,
Hmm.
so fluid in his motion. If anything, that's what gets him in trouble, I think, like in his young career, is he's so quick that he just kind of gets like topsy turvy almost, and he just like runs around like a chicken with his head cut off almost. But he has really truly gotten tons of high level experience in an early time in his career. And for a lot of guys, that is sometimes the difference between long-term growth and, not reaching your highest potential.
Yeah.
So for me, I look at Maxi, and that's the type of guy I see like in the future. If you told me he was averaging 29 points a game on like a 5 seed, 4 seed in the East, not shocked at all. He has every piece of the game he needs to do that. I don't know, it's just defense. And even then,
Hmm.
we see some people in the top of the league who play no defense. So I don't think that is really that big of a holdup. But yeah, Maxi is my number one sleeper. Like, people won't say that about him, but he really is in one of the best spots. If Harden leaves,
Hmm.
have no other option but to turn to Maxi. They won't get anybody as good as Maxi in any trade for James Harden. It's impossible. So that being said, he's clearly the next guy to get those reps and get those minutes and touches. Love him.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you, man. It's one of those things that Maxi, depending on the situation, like what happens, and many things like that. He is definitely a guy that will definitely take the next step, especially, with James Harden wanting out of there. We potentially could see Joel Embiid out of there. Now they can start focusing on a young Tyrese Maxey and building around him and really get him going. I kind of want to see what he does in the future. In terms of development, because again, like you said, he's super quick, super speedy, can get to the bucket really quickly. Now it's just like you said, it's about the change of pace. Like, can you do it now slowly, and can you do it without using your speed as your advantage all the time?
True.
Obviously, you want to take advantage of Maxi's speed, but changing it up a little bit so that way teams don't hone in on what Maxi's weaknesses are, and you can counteract it with different things. And so I'm excited for this year, especially just because this is going to finally be a year where Maxi seemingly is a top player on this team and is going to finally get the ball more in his hands than I would say in years past. So I'm excited for that one. In terms of like the final guy that I would say, and this one may or may not be a sleeper, but could potentially be a good, solid player in the near future, I would probably say Sengun.
Yeah,
Alpha
he's
Sengun
right
from
there for me
Houston.
too.
Uh, you know, was averaging 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists a game. He was efficient scoring, and now with a coach that I believe that these players will enjoy in Udoka, you're definitely going to get someone who is who a lot of a lot of the teammates are going to like. And as a guy that moves the ball really well, can score the ball efficiently inside. I think he's going to be another great guy and a great addition for the Houston Rockets. Now that he's another year older, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for this Houston team, especially with Udoka. No nonsense, going to finally cut the crap that's been going on in Houston for the last 3 to 4 years, especially with Jalen Green and Christopher and other players that were involved in some situations, and so it's going to be a very interesting thing to see. Uh, Now that is all out the window, finally getting an Alfred Sengun who's going to have a coach that believes in him is probably going to run the offense around him and get guys open looks all the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, he is one of very, very few players you could play. I said it about Franz Wagner. He's right in the same kind of stratosphere of
Mm-hmm.
Jokic light. You know, he has this passing ability that's very uncommon at his size. He also is just very fluid offensively. Like
Yeah.
he does not have a lot of holes in his game. And you look at, I mean, for me, I just think of how unbelievably bad that situation has been for his entire career so far.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that even Sangoon, I think he was the 15th pick in the draft. I might be
Yeah.
wrong. He was like right
Something like that.
outside the lottery. Like there was a ton of people who looked at him and were like, "Who even is this guy? This guy's terrible. Why are we taking these European dudes?" That's the thing, man. He is fundamentally just a sound player. I like you said, Brent, I'm so curious to see what Udoka is going to do with this squad in particular because now I, I'm just fascinated, man. They have so many ways they could take it.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of ball handlers and a lot of question marks as to who should actually be the guy who should be, handling the ball most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny part is I think the person that most people would say is the person least likely to get that honor for the team, and it's Jalen Green. Like he is not that guy. But just like media, everybody look at the team from the outside looking in, like he's
Mm-hmm.
their guard, right? But Sangoon, the results are always better, and now you have Amen Thompson too. It's going to be very fascinating to see what they do,
Yeah.
coaching wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a fun situation for them. And let us know what you guys think about these young guys in the comment section down below. Are you guys in agreement with us? Are these young guys going to take the next step? Can they get to at least top 20, top 15 NBA players in the league? Would love to know your guys' comments and opinions in the comment section down below. As the next generation is starting to fill in, there's going to be more and more guys getting better and better each day, each year. So we're excited to see what you guys think in the comment section down below. So let us know what you guys think.
And importantly, people are going to, age out. That's another part of the NBA that we don't talk about a lot because it's not necessarily the most positive part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, I mean, it can't last forever with these guys. It's going to change sometimes. So, do you want to talk about that? Like people in these positions that maybe are going to fall out, or do we just want to move on past that? Because it's more negative than I feel like we want to be, but it's also just the real side of basketball too. But so I'll
Um,
leave it up to you.
let's save it. Let's save it for
Okay.
another week, and then we can talk about like who we think is gonna probably take a step back. Since we talked about guys that take step forwards this week,
Sure.
talk about guys that take step backs next week. So tune in for that. Again, we'll figure out the way that's gonna work. Obviously, I'm heading out, and so I want to make sure that we are getting that stuff situated. But let's move on to the final segment. Pete, this one I leave up to you.
All right. Cool. So this is going to be a pretty simple topic or gimmick. I want to start. Just want to start doing something. I don't know what the name is going to be, but we'll just call it this for now. It's called Forum Talk. Let's hit the boards, hit the message boards, and see what people are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've gotten increasingly fascinated with as I've gotten older, Bernie, is there's like a dissonance between what real success in basketball looks like and what
Mm-hmm.
casual fan thinks success is, right? And for a long time, I would sit there and I'd shame people, not like to their face. I'm not the type that's going to just talk trash and call people names and, just be generally disrespectful. It's not my situation. It's not how I handle things. However, I do think for a long time, my instinct would be, well, this person's an idiot. I don't need to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
I want to change that. And I want to try and understand a little bit why people think some of the ridiculous things they think. So I think the best way we can do that, Bernie, is to dive into topics on forums that are getting a lot of traction, getting a lot of engagement with the people in said forums.
Mm-hmm.
Read the post and then have our own discussion about it because I think it's fascinating. I think it's truly an interesting thing to see what the casual fan's perspective is on a sport that you and I are way too inside baseball on. Like, I think like we see every bit of news that comes across the all the different tickers. We see all the different sites of
Mm-hmm.
basketball, all the little things we're looking at it, right? So I just sent you a post. Do you see it? Did you see that,
Yeah.
Bernie?
Yep. It's up on the
Got it
screen
pulled
now.
up? Right. So let me read this post. This is getting a lot of traction on Real GM, one of the best basketball news sites, in my opinion. In the post, the headline is Trae Young is ridiculously underrated. Okay. Here's what the poster goes on to say. Just realized that Trae isn't on this Team USA squad, and he apparently wanted to play. Could be a political shoe thing. I don't know what that means, but political thing. Could be his locker room presence. This is a guy who's very underrated. He's been to the conference finals, matched up well against the Bucks before he got hurt, took 2 games from the Celtics in the playoffs this year. As far as his ability, he's impossible to contain because of his handle, speed, and aggressiveness. He's able to hit shots out to 30 feet and can fill it up from mid range and the free throw line. One of the most creative and precise passers in the league. If he were on the Heat, he'd be seen as better than Devin Booker and probably Devin Mitch or Donovan Mitchell. Situation makes or breaks a lot of folks in the league as far as perception goes, but this
Mm-hmm.
guy to me is a clear top 20 player. Celtics would possibly win a championship with him instead of Jaylen Brown. This is a rare offensive talent that's being overshadowed by narratives. Hey, Bernie, there's a lot to unpack in this because this guy covers a lot of Trae Young stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess let me start like this. I think that this is the more common perception of Trae Young. Do you agree or disagree?
Um, I think this is the common perception of Hawks fans and people that are Trae Young fans. I don't necessarily think that this is what everybody around the league says. I think a lot of
Well,
people would say about Trae Young is that he is, um, just like an offensive me guy, like a guy to me kind of similar to a Gilbert Arenas or Tracy McGrady. Maybe a little bit better, or maybe a little bit. Maybe Tracy McGrady's unfair, but those type of players that like offensively can light it up, but are just not on a team. And they made the playoffs last year, so I don't want to discredit them. Uh,
barely, but yeah.
but yeah, just like a guy that just like barely makes the playoffs, does a lot of good stats on a bad team. So I'm curious to see like this year when he finally has Quinn Snyder, is he going to take the step that this guy's talking about, where he's going to be better than Mitchell or better than Devin Booker, which is going to be hard, especially for Booker, because Booker now finally has like a ton of teammates that can get him open looks.
Oh, let me ask you this question, Bernie. You're a Celtics fan. Do you think that if you swapped out Trae Young and Jaylen Brown, you would be celebrating a championship right now?
I don't think so. I think that again, the one thing that concerns me about Trae Young is obviously the size, and we know that you can still win in this league. You can still do a lot of great things at his size. 5'11", 6 foot, maybe 6'1" if they want to go generous. But they're not. You're not winning a championship with a small point guard anymore. Like AI was the last guy to carry a team to that state. But you are not going to win championships or even get close to that with Trae Young, because obviously he's going to be a defensive liability as he is right now anyway. And so I think it's going to be hard for me to say like, yes, the Celtics would win a championship if he was in there. Offensively, he'd be great. I think that he is a guy that could potentially get even Jason Tatum more looks, but defensively, it's going to be more of a liability.
All right, let's get in here. Let me get in on this because I would actually disagree with you from the very jump. I actually don't think it's just a Hawks fan thing. I actually think that this is how most fans feel, casual fans of the NBA, in my opinion. I think I see much more question marks of why do people why is Trey not talked about more from people than the opposite way around. You know, like I feel like there's much more angst in terms of like seeing him be underrated than almost any other player in the league. And it's funny because I see a lot of similarity, not in the way they play necessarily, but the perception of the common fan with him and Russell Westbrook. Okay. Like I see a lot of it. And it's as simple as he plays a very specific way. He plays Trae Young basketball. When I say that, people who watch a lot of basketball know exactly what I mean. He plays very specifically how he plays. That being said, I think this just goes to show how stat focused NBA fans really are. Like how analytic based NBA fans are, you know? Like it's funny to me, especially from this sense. Let me actually go back one step, Bernie, because there's nobody in the league right now, in my opinion, also for Trae Young, that gets more credit for one postseason than he does. And the funny part is the flip side of him is the guy that was in the same postseason debacle as Trae Young, and it's Ben Simmons. I find that their trajectory after those games is very interesting on different sides. At one point, people will look at that and say, you know, Ben Simmons, you absolutely blew this. You're such a joke. You know, you passed the ball, you had an easy dunk. One of the worst guys ever, send him to Shanghai, right? At the same time, there's all these people that can have this perception of that same series that's so incredibly different in the sense that it was Trae Young that elevated Hawks over the 76ers rather than Ben Simmons tanking the 76ers so that the Hawks could elevate over them.
Right.
Where the reality of the situation is that it's column A and column B. It's both. Trae Young was better than people thought at the time. Ben Simmons was clearly detrimental to the team, and the whole 76ers organization was in flux at the time too, relative to what the Hawks were doing. Similar to the select team and this FIBA team, like they had less to lose, less to lose than the 76ers in that series. I don't know, man. I just think it's very interesting that we can look at stats. We have years and years and years of factual evidence that you need to be relevant on both sides of the ball to win at the highest level. We can still pretend that because this guy is so talented offensively, it's a wash on defense. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He has been one of the 5 worst defenders in the league every year he's been in the league, basically, especially in terms of minutes to performance. Like if you rank how much time he has on the court to the performance he gives on defense, it is easily one of the worst. He's one of the worst players in the league. People look at that and they say, well, I don't see that. This is an offensive league. Everybody's scoring all these points. But that's the problem, Bernie. Everybody scores points. So at that point, if that's your strong suit, you just fit into the mold of what everybody else is doing, and now you can't counteract other teams. Therefore, you're less special than people think you are, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I being crazy? Is that too harsh? Because I feel like if you look at what's happened, they hit their peak by fluke. Whether or not people want to argue it was a fluke or not, they should have lost that series to the 76ers, no question asked, as far as I'm concerned. There's no way they were more talented. The problem is that now it happens, so now the history is there that he's been there. We don't look at all that's happened afterwards, Bernie. Their team last year is better on paper than it has ever been before. They have better running mates for him than they've ever had. Better defenders around him. They had one of the worst seasons they've had since he's been on their team. Does that not matter to like the overall game of basketball? I don't know, man. I just have a lot of questions as to like, I guess I don't understand what people value in players anymore, because it's very strange how like, we can look at Ben Simmons and clown him till, cows come home about his lack of shooting. but we can't do that about Trey not playing defense. Like that doesn't matter. It's a strange thing that this forum post, going back to why I wanted to do this topic, like trying to understand what people are looking at that is giving them this, like this is their truth as far as what the NBA is. It isn't mine. I'm willing to try and figure out why it's theirs. And I really think that in today's day and age, Steph Curry generation is all in on guys like Steph Curry. You know, the Trey Youngs of the world will forever get a pass in this generation because he shoots deep threes and because it's such a flashy offensive style that we don't even need to watch him on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's interesting. Let me ask the final question, I guess. Do you think he's ridiculously underrated, Bernie? Or do you think, I guess let me change that. Do you think he's underrated at all?
No, not in any sense. I think he's rightly rated in terms of I don't think he's like a top guard, but definitely in a position where he could be potentially in the near future. I don't think that he's like. There's a lot of other guards I'd put ahead of him, and some of those guards are actually on the list of Team USA. And so I definitely would say that he is probably rightly rated in term for me at least, where he's not the top guy, he's not the worst guy, he's kind of somewhere in the middle. Um, so that's kind of where I would say that Trey Young is rated. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see him as like a guy that is underrated in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely, like you're saying, I think he's perfectly rated just by law of averages, right? There's people who say he's a top 10 guy, and there's people who say he's awful. He's neither of those things. He's very good. He's extremely good on offense, extremely poor on defense. And that, I think, is also, one of the more interesting things with the league nowadays, Bernie, is how committed people are to, like, this guy, he's elite at a thing, so you have to respect it, right?
Mm-hmm.
These guys are all NBA players. They're all elite at something, maybe to differing like extents here and there. Like Trey Young's offensive package is deeper than almost, probably 95% of the league. I agree. Based on the average of basketball, I'm taking Drew Holiday over Trey Young. There's people who would laugh in my face and say I've never watched basketball before because of that take. But like, if you look at the history of basketball, Drew Holiday is a better point guard based on how the sport works than Trey Young. So yeah, I would say I think he's probably a little overrated. So I disagree with you in the sense that he's perfectly rated. He's a little overrated. You can't be a play-in team with another guy who's, all-star level in DeJounte Murray. There's not really any serious injuries and still just be like, well, it didn't go right. Nate McMillan was here. He's the coach. It's like, yeah, he got you to the conference finals. He was there with you. So, yeah, here we go. Forum post. I don't know if people like that. Tell us if you guys think that's a good segment that we keep doing because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are a lot of crazy topics that go crazy viral in these forums that people talk about as if it's just no brain common sense. But maybe it's the old head in me. Maybe it's the old head in us, Bernie. I think we have to start addressing it. Maybe not just like go into it to just, like I said, poo these guys and talk crap about them. Like, that's not even what I want to do to this Trey Young guy. That's
Mm-hmm.
not even the point of the segment. It's literally this guy is watching the sport different than you and I,
Yeah.
how we see it. And that's fascinating. The next guy wrote almost 100% how I feel. So let me just finish second post and then we can wrap up the stream for today. This is the response this guy wrote. I think you're massively underrating how detrimental a negative personality and attitude is to a team, franchise, and winning as a whole. Having positive traits in those areas means everything just as much as talent. 100% true. We have seen so many talented players, well better than what they actually were in the league, come and go
Mm-hmm.
like whispers in a freaking storm because it's just like that's what the league is. If you don't have the attitude and the mentality to separate yourself, everybody's almost similar in the level. You're all at the top 1% of athletes in
Mm-hmm.
basketball. So You got to have the full package to be considered one of the 15 best guys. You have to, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I guess that does it for us. Bernie, I'm going to hand the reins back to you. Thank you for humoring me with this segment. I will say this. If you guys like it, not only let us know if you don't like it, you like it in the comments. Let us know. Also, if you see forum posts that you think are interesting, if you see topics floated around the internet as far as basketball is concerned, send them our way. Leave it in the comment section. We'd love to look at it. Doesn't mean we're going to get to it, but we will we'll definitely try if you guys are interested in hearing more of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And I think it was a great conversation. I think it is something to start looking at to see what these internet trolls are talking about, and some guys that, potentially are trying to just start conversations just to start conversations. It'd be fun to call those stuff out. But like Pete said, we're going to call it here for today. I do appreciate everybody that was tuning in. I appreciate Pete for taking the time to come in and do a stream before we head out. At least I head out on a family vacation. We'll try to work on recording something, and we'll put it live sometime next week. We'll talk about what time works best, just because there's a time difference, and so we'll get that out to you guys. But we'll also clip up some of these segments, especially this one right here about the forum. We'll clip this one up. We'll clip up the other two that we just did today, and along with the stuff that I did, I believe, the previous couple days ago about Stephen A. Smith and his IMG Academy. I know, Pete, we didn't get a chance to talk about it today, unfortunately, but I'm sure you have a lot of things to say about that. Maybe we'll get to it at some point next week and talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how much I have to say. I would just say, think of I get the same feeling as you're not going to throw up. You get that kind of hot, wet feeling in your mouth, oh God, I'm going to gag. It's very similar to that. It's disgusting. It's actually disgusting. Because then, I'm sorry, let me rant for 1 second, Bernie. But as we get out of here, this dude has the audacity to teach kids basketball as if he really knows anything. Then the day after, he's on TV. The day after you sent that to me, I see him on TV talking about boxing, which I'm also very into. He was talking about Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford, huge fight that happened a week ago. As if he's an expert on that. It's man, you can't be an expert on all these things and then go out there and have people pay you money to teach them as if you really are God's gift to coaching. It's crazy. Snake oil salesman at his finest. Stephen A. doing his thing. I mean, I guess by today's standards, go get that bag, my guy. But whatever. I don't care. He's got enough bags.
Yeah, he's got the ESPN bag, and they're quickly getting rid of guys just to continue to get other bags that they're looking into. But
dude, he's got that Supermax.
He's got the Supermax right now from ESPN, and ESPN is bleeding money. But with that being said, thank you once again for joining us here on The Charge, giving you the latest NBA news and rumors and also basketball opinions. We appreciate you guys for hopping in, tuning in, checking us out. Again, let us know in the comment section down below of all the topics that we talked about today, whether it was Team USA basketball, whether it was the top 50 NBA players. Do you agree with the young players that potentially could take some of those guys' spots? And also let us know about this forum topic as well, because it is a lot of fun to talk about just what people are saying on the internet, because anybody and everybody is saying something on the internet. But with that being said, thank you once again for joining us here. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Be on the lookout this week. And of course, next week as well, to be discussing topics throughout the week. And we're going to have a lot of fun with it. But with that being said, my name is Bernie. Pete, thank you once again for joining us here on The Charge. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, brother.
And we'll catch everybody on the next episode of The Charge. Be on the lookout for this whole week about these next topics coming very soon. Anyway, guys, we'll catch you later.